Have you ever felt the crushing weight of invisibility, when your very existence seems to fade into the background, overlooked by a world too busy to notice? Today's story delves into that silent suffering, but carries within it a powerful message about dignity, compassion, and how the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward in ways we could never imagine. Sometimes it's in our moments of greatest vulnerability that we discover our most profound strength. The early morning air hung heavy with moisture as Miriam Kostova pulled her threadbare cardigan tighter around her thin shoulders. At 73, each step across the uneven cobblestones sent jolts of pain through her arthritic knees, but she pressed forward with the quiet determination that had carried her through 7 decades of hardship. The brown headscarf she wore, once her mother's, now faded and frayed at the edges, covered silver-streaked hair that hadn't seen proper shampoo in weeks, not since the water had been shut off in her apartment building for 3 days. Miriam clutched a small leather pouch containing exactly 12 coins, all that remained of her monthly pension after the rent and electricity. 12 coins to last 12 days. She had calculated and recalculated throughout the sleepless night, knowing the mathematics of survival better than she had ever known the mathematics they tried to teach her in school 40 years ago. 1 small portion of vegetables each day, nothing more. The hunger had become such a familiar companion that she sometimes forgot what it felt like to be satisfied. In her other hand, she gripped something far more precious than money, a small, worn prayer book with gilded edges now dulled by decades of daily handling. The faded ribbon bookmark perpetually rested on Psalm 40, her anchor through countless storms. I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. The marketplace sprawled before her, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds that once brought her joy. Before Nikolai had died, before their modest savings had disappeared into hospital bills and funeral costs, before the world had decided that elderly widows were invisible. "Excuse me," she murmured, approaching the first vegetable stand, where pyramids of glossy eggplants and vibrant peppers tempted customers. The vendor, a heavy-set man with a perpetual scowl, continued his animated conversation with a well-dressed woman selecting the finest produce. Miriam waited patiently, 1 minute stretching into 5, then 10. When the wealthy customer departed with her overstuffed bags, Miriam stepped forward again. "Excuse me, I was wondering if you had any—" "Next!" the vendor called, looking straight past her to the young couple behind. The man's eyes had slid over Miriam as though she were made of glass, transparent and insignificant. She shuffled aside, swallowing the humiliation that had become as familiar as hunger. This wasn't new. 3 years of widowhood had taught her how quickly the world forgets those who no longer contribute to its economy of youth and vitality. Miriam moved to the next stall, where a woman sold root vegetables. She waited again, watching customers who arrived after her being served before her. When she finally reached the front, she pointed to the smallest, most imperfect potatoes. "How much for those?" she asked. The vendor sighed irritably. "Those? 2 coins each." Miriam's heart sank. Yesterday, they had been 1 coin each. "Has the price changed since yesterday? Look, if you're going to waste my time haggling, move along. I have real customers waiting." The word stung like a physical blow. Real customers, as though her meager coins were somehow less valid, as though her hunger was less deserving of satisfaction, as though she herself was less real. "I understand," Miriam whispered, stepping back. She moved through the market like a ghost, invisible, until she became an inconvenience, at which point she transformed into an annoyance to be dismissed. At the far end of the marketplace, Miriam approached a fruit vendor whose stand wasn't quite as busy. His produce wasn't as pristine as the others, but his prices were often more reasonable. Still, she waited as 3 people who arrived after her were served first. Her legs ached from standing, but there were no benches nearby. The city had removed them years ago to discourage loitering, which apparently included elderly people resting their weary bones. When Miriam finally approached the fruit vendor, she felt a tear slide down her weathered cheek. She wiped it away quickly, not wanting to add the shame of public emotion to her already heavy burden. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible above the market din. The vendor glanced up briefly, then returned to rearranging his display. "What do you want?" he asked without looking at her. "Do you have any bruised apples you might sell for less? Or perhaps some overripe bananas?" The man sighed heavily. "Look, I'm trying to run a business here, not a charity. If you can't afford proper fruit, the food bank is open on Thursdays." The food bank, where she would stand in line for 3 hours only to be told that supplies had run out, where younger, stronger people pushed ahead while volunteers looked the other way, where dignity went to die. "Thank you for the information," she said, the politeness ingrained despite everything. As she turned away, she heard the vendor cheerfully greet the next customer. "Good morning, sir. Beautiful day, isn't it? How can I help you today?" Miriam blinked back fresh tears. When had she become so completely invisible? There had been a time when she commanded respect as a wife, a mother, a primary school teacher beloved by generations of children. Now she was nothing more than an inconvenience, a reminder of the frailty that awaits us all. She was about to leave the market with her empty basket when she noticed a small commotion near the entrance. A young mother was frantically searching through her purse, her face flushed with embarrassment as her toddler wailed beside her. The vegetable vendor, the same one who had ignored Miriam earlier, was impatiently drumming his fingers on the counter. "I'm so sorry," the young woman was saying, her voice tinged with panic. "I must have left my wallet at home." "I can come back." "You've already wasted enough of my time," the vendor snapped, beginning to return her carefully selected items to their bins. "I can't hold these for you." Miriam watched the scene unfold, recognizing in the young mother's face the same shame she herself had felt countless times. The woman's clothes were clean, but worn at the edges, her shoes scuffed from too many miles. The child beside her, red-faced from crying, wore a jacket with sleeves slightly too short. Without fully understanding why, Miriam found herself moving toward them. Her gnarled fingers reached into her precious leather pouch, extracting 7 of her 12 remaining coins. "Excuse me," she said, her voice stronger now. "I believe the young lady dropped these." Both the vendor and the young mother turned to her in surprise. I didn't," the mother began, confusion evident in her eyes. Miriam pressed the coins firmly into the woman's hand. "Please," she whispered, "take them." Understanding dawned in the young mother's eyes, followed by a flood of gratitude and something else, recognition of Miriam's humanity, of her existence. For the first time in what felt like years, someone truly saw her. "Thank you," the young woman whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I promise I'll find a way to repay you." "No need," Miriam replied with a small smile. "Just remember that we're all visible in God's eyes, even when the world looks past us." As Miriam turned to leave, now with only 5 coins to her name and no food in her basket, she felt a curious lightness in her chest. The hunger remained, but something else had been fed, something far more essential than her body. What Miriam didn't notice was the man standing nearby, phone in hand, who had captured the entire exchange. Roman Petrov had come to the market that morning to film content for his struggling social media channel. A 32-year-old former journalist who had lost his job when the local newspaper downsized, Roman had been desperately seeking authentic stories that might resonate with viewers tired of staged influencer content. In Miriam's simple act of kindness, he had found something extraordinary. Conversation transcript. Roman Petrov was Real Stories Matter. Just witnessed the most incredible thing at Central Market. An elderly woman who had been ignored by every vendor gave her last coins to help a young mother who forgot her wallet. She has nothing and still gave everything. This is what humanity should be. Market Watcher. Was this staged? Everything's fake these days. Roman Petrov, should real stories matter? 100% real. I was filming market scenes for a different project. The woman doesn't even know I recorded it. You can see vendors ignoring her before this happened. I'm trying to find her now. Gone compassion matters. I'm literally crying. Did you see how she wiped her tears before helping? She was already hurting and still helped someone else. Asked city councilwoman, can someone identify this woman? Our community should support her the way she supported a stranger. Roman Petrov, real stories matter, working on it. Will update when I find her. No one should be invisible. End transcript. By evening, Roman's video had been viewed more than 100,000 times. By morning, it had reached 1 million. Comments flooded in from around the country, then around the world. Who is this angel? Find her. I want to help. This broke me. When was the last time I even noticed an elderly person struggling? Meanwhile, Miriam had returned to her small apartment, unaware of her growing fame. With only 5 coins remaining, she had stopped at the day-old bread shop and purchased a single small loaf, enough for 3 days if she was careful. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, cutting a thin slice and saying a prayer of gratitude despite everything. Her simple dinner was interrupted by a knock at the door, something so rare that she initially thought she had imagined it. When the knocking persisted, she rose cautiously and approached the door. "Who is it?" she called, her voice wavering. "My name is Roman Petrov. I'm sorry to disturb you, but I saw what you did at the market today, and I wanted to talk to you." Miriam hesitated, years of living alone having taught her caution. "What do you want?" "Just to talk. I'm a journalist. Well, I used to be. I recorded what happened with the young mother. People want to help you, Mrs. Kostova." How did he know her name? Confusion and a flicker of fear crossed Miriam's face as she cracked the door open. Chain still latched. The man standing in the hallway was in his early 30s, with kind eyes and disheveled hair. He held up his phone, showing her a video of herself at the market, giving coins to the young mother. Beneath it were thousands of comments. "I don't understand," Miriam whispered. "Your kindness. It's gone viral. That means many people have seen it and been touched by it. They want to help you now." Miriam's hand trembled as she unlatched the chain. She had never sought attention, never wanted to be a spectacle. But after years of invisibility, the idea that people could suddenly see her, truly see her, was overwhelming. Over the next few days, Miriam's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Local news stations picked up the story. Donations poured in, not just money but food, clothing, offers of assistance. The market vendors, who had ignored her, now greeted her enthusiastically, offering their finest produce at no cost. A transparently self-serving change that Miriam noted with quiet amusement, but accepted with grace. Roman visited daily, helping her navigate her unexpected fame and protecting her from those who might exploit her story. He was fascinated by this woman who had given her last coins without hesitation, and he found himself sharing meals with her, listening to stories of her life before invisibility had claimed her. "I taught primary school for 40 years, she told him over tea one afternoon. "I loved every child who passed through my classroom. When I retired, I thought I would be remembered, at least by some. But people forget so quickly." "Not everyone," Roman said. "The young mother from the market has been trying to meet you. Her name is Elena. She says she was in your class 20 years ago." Miriam's teacup clattered against its saucer. Elena Radovich, little Elena with the red ribbons in her hair. "I don't know about ribbons, but her married name is Sokolov now. She recognized you after our video spread, but she was too overwhelmed to say anything at the market." Tears filled Miriam's eyes. "I remember every child, you know. Every single one." The reunion with Elena the following day brought healing Miriam hadn't known she needed. Elena had indeed been her student, now grown with a child of her own, and struggling as a single mother after her husband had abandoned them. The marketplace encounter hadn't been their first since Miriam's teaching days. Elena had seen her former teacher many times, but had been too consumed by her own problems to truly notice the elderly woman's plight. "I should have recognized you," Elena sobbed as they embraced. "I walked past you so many times. I didn't see you." "We all become blind sometimes," Miriam said gently, "especially when we're fighting our own battles." What neither woman knew was that Roman's video had reached far beyond their city. In a wealthy neighborhood 300 miles away, a distinguished man in his 60s sat in his home office, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. Dr. Alexei Vronsky had built a successful career as a cardiac surgeon, his name associated with medical innovations and charitable foundations. Few knew the truth of his origins, the poverty he had escaped, the family he had left behind, the sister he had promised to care for but had gradually lost contact with as success pulled him into a different world. The woman in the video, giving away her last coins, was unmistakably his sister Miriam. The moment of recognition hit him like a physical blow. 30 years had passed since he had last seen her, at Nikolai's wedding, where Alexei had made empty promises to visit more often. Then came medical conferences, international speaking engagements, a prestigious position that demanded every moment of his time. Occasional money transfers in the early years, which he eventually convinced himself were no longer necessary. Christmas cards that became less frequent until they stopped entirely. His successful life had required forgetting where he came from, and in doing so, he had forgotten the person who had sacrificed everything to put him through medical school, his older sister, who had given up her own education opportunities to ensure he could pursue his. "Miriam," he whispered to the empty room, "what have I done?" The revelation shattered something within Dr. Vronsky. He cancelled his appointments, cleared his schedule, and boarded the first available train. His carefully constructed identity, the polished, confident surgeon who had risen from nothing through his own merits, revealed itself as the self-serving fiction it had always been. Meanwhile, Miriam was adjusting to her new reality. The donations had paid her overdue bills and stocked her pantry, but more meaningful was the community that had formed around her. Neighbors who had previously ignored her now stopped to chat. Former students reached out with letters and visits. The market vendors saved their best produce for Grandmother Miriam, as she was now affectionately known. Roman continued documenting her story, but with her consent now, capturing the way a single act of kindness had transformed not just one life, but an entire community. His following grew, not through sensationalism, but through authentic storytelling that reminded people of the humanity they shared. It was during one of these filming sessions, as Miriam distributed fresh bread to homeless individuals in the park, insisting on using some of her donations to help others, that a sleek black car pulled up nearby. Roman noticed it first, the expensive vehicle out of place in their working-class neighborhood. When the distinguished-looking man stepped out, Roman immediately sensed this was someone important. The stranger stood frozen, watching Miriam from a distance, his composed expression crumbling into something raw and painful. Miriam felt the presence before she saw him. Something, intuition, perhaps, or the mysterious connection that persists between siblings despite time and distance, made her turn. The breadbasket nearly slipped from her fingers. "Alexei?" she whispered, the name unfamiliar on her lips after so many years. The dignified doctor took one halting step forward, then another. "Miri," he said, using the childhood nickname no one had spoken in decades. Roman captured the moment on camera. The tentative approach, the hesitation, the way Miriam's hand reached up to touch her brother's face as if confirming he was real. But then, respecting the privacy of this unexpected reunion, he lowered his camera. The siblings walked to a nearby bench, decades of absence stretching between them like an unbridgeable chasm. And yet, somehow, words began to flow, halting at first, then in a torrent. "I thought you were taken care of," Alexei said, his voice breaking. "The trust I set up, "What trust?" Miriam asked, confusion evident. The truth emerged slowly, painfully. The financial manager, Alexei, had entrusted with Miriam's care, had embezzled the funds, fabricating reports that Miriam was receiving monthly payments. When the man died suddenly 7 years ago, the deception died with him. Alexei, believing his sister was comfortable, had lost himself in his work, in his philanthropic efforts for strangers, while his own family suffered. "I failed you," he said simply, the accomplished doctor reduced to a remorseful brother. "There is no excuse." Miriam sat silently, absorbing this revelation. The anger she might have expected to feel was strangely absent. Perhaps she had carried too many burdens for too long to add another. "We both failed," she said finally. "I was too proud to reach out when things became difficult, too ashamed to let you see what my life had become." As the siblings talked, a realization crystallized for Miriam, one that had been forming since that day in the marketplace. Throughout her years of invisibility, she had clung to her faith, believing that even when no human eyes saw her suffering, God still witnessed her pain and her perseverance. That belief had sustained her through the darkest nights. But now she understood something deeper. Sometimes God sees us through the eyes of others. Sometimes divine recognition comes through human connection. Her small act of kindness had created a ripple that brought visibility not just to her, but to countless others like her, the elderly, the poor, the forgotten ones existing in the shadows of society. "I never wanted fame," she told Alexei. "I just wanted to be seen." In that moment of clarity, looking into her brother's tear-filled eyes, Miriam felt the full circle of her journey, from teacher to widow, from invisibility to recognition, from abandonment to reunion. The prayer book in her pocket seemed to pulse with the truth she had always known, but only now fully understood. No one is truly invisible in the eyes of love. In the days that followed, Alexei moved back to the city, taking a position at the local hospital. He could never recover the lost years, but he could ensure his sister's remaining time would be filled with dignity and comfort. Not through impersonal donations, but through the daily acts of presence that weave the true fabric of family. Roman's documentary about Miriam, released 3 months later, became an unexpected catalyst for social change. Communities across the country initiated programs to connect isolated elderly residents with younger volunteers. Market vendors established dignity corners where those with limited means could shop without shame. Schools implemented curricula about aging and empathy. For Miriam, the greatest gift wasn't the material security or even her reconciliation with Alexei, though she treasured both. It was the restoration of her purpose. She began volunteering at a community center, sharing stories with children and reminding them that everyone deserves to be seen, especially those the world has forgotten how to see. 1 year after the market incident, Miriam returned to the same spot where her journey from invisibility had begun. The same vendors who had once looked through her now greeted her warmly. The cobblestones that had hurt her knees were now smoothed out. One of many accessibility improvements the city had implemented after Miriam's story highlighted the challenges faced by elderly residents. As she moved through the marketplace, now leaning on a cane crafted by a local artisan who had been inspired by her story, Miriam paused to watch a scene unfolding before her. An elderly man, his clothes worn and his back bent with age, was being served ahead of younger customers. The vendor was taking time to explain each vegetable, to ask about his preferences, to see him. In that moment, Miriam understood that true change doesn't come from viral videos or donations, necessary though they may be. It comes from the quiet revolution of recognition, from the choice each of us makes to truly see one another, especially those at the margins of our vision. She thought of the words she had spoken to Elena that day in the market. "We're all visible in God's eyes, even when the world looks past us." Now she understood the completion of that truth, and sometimes we are called to be God's eyes in a world that has forgotten how to see. With that knowledge settled deep in her heart, Miriam continued through the market, greeting friends both old and new, visible at last. Not because of fame or family connections, but because she had never stopped seeing others even when no one saw her. And in that seeing, she had taught a community, a brother, and perhaps a world, that the true measure of a life is not in what we accumulate, but in what we notice, what we honor, and what we freely give away.